Hello, welcome to Pebblebrook Village. I am Peony, and this is the week ahead forecast, tarot forecast for the week of April 20th. All right, so let's go ahead and just get right into this. The energy for this week, we have the Queen of Cups. We love the queens. So good cards. Um, this is emotion. It's emotional journey. Cups are your compassion, your empathy, emotional intelligence, emotional maturity, kind of stories of that. And if you think about, the Ace of Cups is that innate initiating energy. The Aces of um, are the start, right? They are an invitation. It's an energy that is there, and you are being compelled to use it to start something new. And there's different versions of that energy depending on, if it's cups versus wands. And in the case of cups, I like to look at the Ace of Cups as it's an invitation into an emotional journey. It's also that initial filling of your cup. It is pouring water into the cup that you hold. It is filling that cup and giving you that sort of emotional bastion. And the journey of the cups is how you manage that, how you learn to make sure that you're not overpouring or, even hoarding to a point and becoming um, too logical in places where sometimes you need to let the emotions kind of guide you. There's a time and place for both. It's very fine balance. It's hard to walk, and I don't think a single one of us ever gets perfect with it. It's just a matter of like it's important to be mindful of that. And the Queen of Cups is someone that has learned, how to do that. It is someone who is very spiritual, intuitive, compassionate, very connected, very grand water trine, right? This is a caretaker. This is somebody that takes care of their community, of their house, of any kind of thing where there is not a central figure, but kind of a mother figure or mother-like figures that are managing the care of others around them. And I think right now, it's extremely important to, one, not overdo being the Queen of Cups yourself, right? If the Ace of Cups is that initial cup filling, we can't just pour and pour and pour without stopping to have our cup refilled. And that could be it could be rest, right? It's not necessarily somebody physically doing something with you or even, physically helping you, mentally, emotionally helping you. Sometimes it is knowing when to take care of yourself and put yourself first. Right. And sometimes it is asking for help. It is, seeking your own Queen of Cups, whether that be a therapist, a partner, or a close friend. And sometimes even just community gathering, things like meeting up at a park with community can be a way to refill that cup, and anything like that. But yeah, the queen is somebody who has learned to manage this. I think the Queen of Cups is also it's not Earth energy, but like there are that Venusian Taurus vibes from it as we're going into Taurus season two, right? And I think that's really important to consider. And I also want to like go back to so yeah, you can't be the Queen of Cups for yourself. You can be the Queen of Cups, you can be this queen, this caretaker for others. And you can be it for yourself, but you can't do everything yourself, and we have to be mindful of when to seek that through means that are not ourselves. Okay. And also, I think there's a message here that there are people right now, um, because of the news stories surrounding motherless, there are people in our lives that need you to sit down and listen to them and genuinely listen to them without being combative, without saying, well, not me, because this isn't about you. This is about a collective wound. This is about people that are hurting. This is about people that are scared. And if you really want to be an ally for those people, if you want to be that Queen of Cups for those people in your life, it means to sit down and to listen. And if what you're hearing makes you angry, stop and hold on to that anger for a second and ask, why are you directing it towards this person in your life that is communicating the things that are making them uncomfortable, scared, angry, um right? Because that's not who you should be mad at, that's not who you should be defensive towards. So, and that's kind of like the duality of the Queen of Cups, and knowing when to be the Queen of Cups for somebody and knowing when to seek the Queen of Cups for yourself. All right. Why is this here? We have the Eight of Swords. Um, this is the first decan of Gemini, which is where, big astrology coming up. Uranus is finishing its time in Taurus and moving into Gemini. I won't belabor everything that goes with that. There's plenty of information out there if you want to look into the astrology of what, deep dive into that and what it indicates. I just think it's fascinating that this card, because the Eight of Cups, or sorry, the Eight of Swords with the Queen of Cups, this is very much like people are feeling restricted, people are feeling powerless, they're feeling stuck, and it's the swords can be, hard cards, depending on what your perspective is when you're looking at them. They're usually tough lessons. They're very, um, in how Saturn kind of rules oppositions. Swords cards are kind of oppositions. They're squares. They are hard aspects. They're not inherently negative. They're not inherently violent, but kind of like how I said with the Queen of Cups, like when you are being that queen for somebody in your life, for a community in your life, and you sit down and you just listen, um, this is very much like there are people that are working on stepping into um, their queen era. And that starts with facing some hard truths and releasing a lot of grief, and that takes, you know, having people to rely on within community in terms of your, safety and just a safe space to be able to openly communicate these thoughts, because that's what swords are. Swords are, it's air, it's movement, it's the act of thought leaving the body, right? Giving life to ideas, speaking things, not getting mentally bogged down, especially with the Eight of Swords. Are we, is there negative self-talk that we are directing towards ourselves and keeping us feeling bound and powerless right now. There's stuff out of our control that is certainly having that impact on a lot of people right now, and that's valid. What in your life do you have control over where we can redirect some of that energy and take our power back and not linger in the negative? Acknowledge the negative, and acknowledge that there is certainly in some aspects right now, there's a lot of grief, and give space for that. And that's not a 24-hour thing. It may not be a week thing. And it's not to invalidate how hard that can be. It is just a sign that we can't keep ourselves bound to that grief. If we want to step into our power, we have to find safe spaces to release that and move on from it. This is also um, kind of looking at Uranus and Taurus season right now, and Uranus going into the first decan of Gemini, and Venus being in Taurus as Uranus is finishing up its time there. It's going to conjunct it, and then they'll both kind of spend some time in Gemini together. I think there's kind of been this back and forth with Venus and Uranus, and this comfort zone of what makes us feel safe and abundant, um, versus this disruption that is happening. And right around when COVID was starting, and a lot of other things during that time period, this is when Uranus was still fresh in Taurus. And I think, when I say that I get COVID vibes, I don't mean like pandemic. I just get vibes from that time period of things like Me Too, of the wildfires in Australia, um, in California, I believe. I'm pretty sure that there's been so many, and it's hard to keep track of all the years, but if I'm not mistaken, I know right before like the lockdowns, there were the ones in Australia. I think there were some really devastating ones in California around that time period as well. But like Me Too movement, Black Lives Matter, all that type of energy, and especially focusing on the Me Too movement with the news that has come out right now, and really thinking about the lessons that Saturn taught during that time on restrictions and redrawing boundaries and kind of reassessing life. And then also that's the disruption of Uranus, right? Like it disrupted things, it disrupted the supply chain, it disrupted daily life, it disrupted communication. How is that, relevant to today? What can we take from that time period and use to be better prepared within our communities, within our families going forward, right? Like look at the joy and the love and the abundance, of passion of Venus, and what is being disrupted, and how can we, um, kind of pivot to meet that, because it's stuff that's out of our control, right? So what we do to pivot to meet that? Um, right. And then lastly, we have the Three of Wands. Um, yeah, so this is the second decan of Aries, which is, there's been some stuff passed through there. There's going to be some more stuff moving into there. Um, as we go. The big buildup in Aries is clearing up as we go through this week now. Some of the more, slower moving, the generational planets will be spending some more time in there. Mercury is, Mars are still making their way through it. Um, and this is, and I think if we've gotten Ace of Wands in some of these readings, we've gotten the Two of Wands in some of these readings, and remember, aces are invitations, and Ace of Wands is that spark. It's that spark of creativity, and it's an invitation. Like it is the initiating fire, but if you don't manage that flame, you won't get anything out of it. It doesn't just, like the ideas popping. Um, if you don't work on intentionally manifesting them, they're just going to stay inside of you. And then you're going to be like that Eight of Swords, and you're going to be bound by this, all these internalized feelings or thoughts or ideas. And it's really about like getting out of your own way and stop internalizing and start leading. Whether that's like in your household, whether that's in community, and that's not like, I don't mean to be like a jerk and be like, okay, we're doing it this way, but I mean take initiative, right? If you have ideas, if you see something that you think needs to be fixed in any aspect of your life, communicate that. Don't just hold that inside and let resentment build towards people, communities, etc. Like do something about it. People only know what they know, and if you're binding yourself to all of these thoughts, and feeling blindfolded and stuck, it can also be like stuck in comfort zone. And I think when you look at like all three cards with the Queen of Cups, the Eight of Swords, the Three of Wands, it's this, we're stuck in a comfort zone. We're limited. There's fear of risk, right? Of taking risk. There's that impulse, there's that initiation of Aries, but there's also that fear of maybe being misunderstood, that fear of failing, making mistakes, which is, are things we can't control. I will say this in perpetuity: we make mistakes on a daily basis, and it's not about making the mistakes; it's how we, acknowledge and accept them. Right? If it's a mistake that hurts somebody, what do we do to acknowledge that and genuinely make that person feel better? And that's a very Queen of Cups moment, right? And I like to think of like reversed fire cards as combustion. It is, we're letting stuff build up inside of us, and it's this heat and it's this intense fire, and it's got to go somewhere. And if we don't release it, we don't find a release, whether it's getting ideas out of our heads, whether it's, going on a hike, exercising, yoga, music, whatever, if we don't find a way to release it, it is going to explode inside of us. And then that just is going, can cause so many problems. Um, so, yeah, it's really, I think, in summary, we can't shoulder everything, and we can't be our only emotional bastion in a personal life. We have to seek help. We have to talk to somebody. We have to find safe spaces, but we also have to be genuine safe spaces for everybody. And that means listening. And that means not being stuck in this anger that a communication might make you feel. Don't direct that anger at somebody in a very Aries like impulsive reaction. Think about it. Why are you angry? In some cases, it might be the way that someone stated something, but when it's the information that someone is communicating to you that makes you angry, you're not angry at that person. You're angry at how that information is making you feel. And you need to stop and ask yourself, why is this making me feel angry? That anger is like a check engine light. It's important. Anger is a very important emotion. It's equally important not to let that build and burn in us until we just combust, right? It's managing that in a safe and authentic and compassionate way. So from a personal aspect this week, make sure that your cup is being filled and you're not overpouring, and make sure that you're finding space to not be trapped inside of your thoughts. Find a way to move and get outside of your head, how whatever that is personally for you. There's no right way to do that. With a lot of Aries energy, sometimes that can be very body related and like body movement, like dance or exercise or hiking, stuff like that. But it certainly does not need to be. Some of us are, I tend to connect with music as well as like exercise and stuff like that, but it's a balance for me. So, find what works for you and really get out of your head this week, and stop and think for just directing your anger at individuals. All right, let's look at the clarifying card for this week. This is from the Phantom Wise Tarot. So let's see what we get. Okay. The Hierophant. Yeah, I think this again, if you're feeling lost, if you're feeling emotionally empty, seek out that person that is like a therapist to you in your life. I know not everybody has access to therapy. There is a cost, boundary there for some people. It's unfortunate that that is the reality we live in, but that is the reality we live in. But so I don't mean to be reductive when I say, therapist, or I certainly don't also mean to imply that your best friend that you vent to is the same as a licensed therapist necessarily. But we have access to what we have access to. It doesn't have to be perfect. You don't know everything. You never will. None of us ever will. We can always learn from others. And the Hierophant is somebody, it's very Sagittarius, it's very Jupiter, it's important to sit with the knowledge that you have and parse through it and make the best decisions. It's also important to remember that yes, you don't know everything, and that sitting with other people, sitting with communities and listening, even when some of the things that you hear might make you uncomfortable, even when some of the stuff you hear, the gut reaction might be anger and to react, it's important to face that discomfort. And it's important to not weaponize it and lash out. It's important to keep learning and growing and finding people, whether it's community leaders, whether, find your Queen of Cups. Find the people in your community that can pour back into you as you pour into them in this very, you know, reciprocal and equitable sort of relationship. All right. That is what I have for this week. Um, yeah, just you don't have to be the only Queen of Cups in your life. Don't let those thoughts bind you and hold you in place, to the point that you let fire and emotion and rage build up in you until you combust. Um, right? Get it out. Acknowledge the grief, and let it flow out of you. Find safe spaces to cry, find safe spaces to feel, but don't let it build up inside of you. We are all queens when we find that emotional balance. We all deserve to be that queen. Okay? Remember that going through this week. Treat yourself like a queen. If people around you don't respect that, take a break, walk away, don't engage with them. They're not worth your time. All right. Love you all. And I will see you next Monday for the next week ahead. Bye.